My work is really around looking at, if we want to kind of hone in and spotlight on it, it's really looking at healthy versus unhealthy relationships. And when you also think about it, that is kind of really comparing and really understanding like what is a loving relationship or a healthy relationship versus one that's unhealthy or abusive, right? And sometimes it gets blurry or it gets confusing in terms of what we would consider abuse or what we would consider okay and not necessarily abuse, but maybe not a good choice. Have clear understanding about experiences that we want to make sure that we have in terms of a positive experience in terms of relationships or love or being with someone, and then really thinking about the things that we don't want to have, the unhealthy things, the things that are we would consider abuse or abusive. Give a moment and just think about it. Think in your minds and think in your memory bank as to what were your first messages about love in a relationship. Where did we get those messages from too? So what were some of those first messages and where did we get some of those messages? Think about who told us these messages. Did we observe these messages? I'm thinking about when I was a little girl and some movies for children that really had messages about love, like for example, a lot of the Disney movies like The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast, but also maybe some stories and fairy tales that our families told us, our parents told us. Sometimes we got messages from TV, sometimes we got messages from music, songs that we heard on the radio or in our home. So, you have to really think about where did we get these messages and what were those messages? Even like when you think about that, some of the fairy tales, like even with Cinderella or even with a lot of other messages we get from these movies, it's one, like the first time you meet them, that's it, you're head over heels in love with them. And then the next thing we know in the movie, they're getting married, right? So some of that messaging may not be the healthiest. It's like, what happens in between? Where are we getting to know someone? Where are we allowing them to build trust, right? Those are some messages that we sometimes don't realize we are internalizing, right? Even though we know it's make believe, even though we think it's a cartoon or a fairy tale, there's something about some messages that we get as children that are reinforced throughout our lives from family and friends, and maybe reinforced by movies and music and things that just kind of make us think about things that are not necessarily the best or the healthiest, and make them seem as though they're okay, like they are healthy, they are what love is supposed to be like. Okay, if we can look at love versus what is not love, or love versus abuse, we have to understand that this is like real life experiences where we are getting these messages, where we are getting some of this information, right? In your head that you're worth more, that you deserve the best, that you are important, things like that. That sometimes can get cloudy when people who are supposed to love you are the ones that are hurting you, right? So then sometimes we get this message that love hurts, right? And whether it's from our family, whether it's from even songs, favorite songs, how many songs have we heard that are about love hurting? millions, right? I mean, and sometimes we are singing the words and we don't realize what the message is. But some now as an adult, sometimes I think about some of the songs that I sang growing up and some of the things that I hear now on the radio, and I'm like, wow, that's really not a good message. That's really not, the best thing out there, right? um and there's even like songs about like stalking, there's songs about attacking, there's songs about jealousy, rage, that really end up in people getting hurt, harmed, damaged, right? um and all of this is to say that we absorb things, whether consciously or unconsciously, whether through actual experiences like was shared. And we want to be clear now as adults that what real love is and what it is not, right? But I don't think, we ever contrasted that or versed that with what is, the healthy piece, or what is real, what is a healthy relationship based on respect and kindness and all of that, right? I even think about some of the messages that we get, particularly about love as women, right? Do you think that women and men get the same messages about love in society? So with men, we see a lot of messages about ownership, right? If you are my partner, my wife, my girlfriend, about, you belong to me, there's this ownership, right? And that's not the healthiest perspective, because then it seems like we are property, right? And even though people are not saying that literally, I own you, you're my property, some do, but the message gets stuck in the head, right? And then that message of property and ownership can turn into abuse in everyday life, right? We have something called patriarchy. Patriarchy really is the thing that is the layout in our society that says men are here and women are there. When I come and I do my domestic violence talk, we talk about physical abuse, but we also talk about emotional abuse, verbal abuse, the psychological stuff, the financial abuse, the sexual abuse, right? And we put so much attention on the physical abuse that sometimes when it's not physical, we don't realize that it is abuse, right? Especially with the messages that we just talked about from family, from friends, from, all the different types of media, right? Even social media now, right? So women are supposed to be this loving, kind, gentle, caring person, the person who's also supposed to take care of the relationship. Like, that responsibility is put on women. You're supposed to fix it, make it right. And that's not put on men. Then, you're kind of thinking also, if I'm supposed to fix it, I'm supposed to make it right. If things go wrong, sometimes we internalize it as maybe there's something wrong with me, right? Which is also a negative experience for women, because, if you think that the abuse is your fault, or if something bad has happened that it's your fault, then there's a lot of shame and a lot of blame and a lot of suffering, right? And those are the things that we want to avoid, prevent, and stop, right, in any way possible. We are seeing things like good communication, healthy communication. We're looking at caring, trust, honesty, consent, right? Equality, safety, things that we should hold true to in terms of what is real love, what is healthy love, right? This is really should be at the core of us understanding that if we want this, then all the opposite stuff is stuff that is unhealthy and that it is not love, right? Because you don't see in this heart here words like abuse, controlling, stalking, verbal put downs, forcing you to have sex, embarrassing you, shaming you. Those are the things that you do not see in this heart, right? We definitely want to be clear that what is love, and what it is not, it is not. And we can label that abuse, we can label that unhealthy, but we definitely want to think and focus on the important things here. We should not be feeling fear when we're communicating in a healthy relationship. So if we do feel fear when we're communicating, then maybe that's a red flag to tell us that this relationship may not be good, right? Setting boundaries, saying how we feel, telling each other what we think, but even more so, if we are making a commitment in this communication, if we are making a statement and saying that we are going to honor and respect each other, then we also need to follow through on that, right? So that kind of commitment in a relationship is also very important in terms of communication. If we're going to do love versus abuse, or if we're going to look at a compare and contrast, these little everyday experiences are important for us to highlight, because sometimes they're confusing, especially if there's no physical, but you have to look at, wait, is this a pattern? Is this person doing this all the time? And why are they doing it to try to control the conversation? Are they trying to make me feel bad? Are they trying to make themselves seem smarter than me or better than me? Those are all warning signs and messages for us, right? Just to really think about. First and foremost, as you are in a relationship, you want to talk about how you want the relationship to be, right? And it should be a process, right? It's not like the fairy tales that we meet today and get married tomorrow, or we meet today and there's automatic trust, right? Trust should be an earned process. And this should be for anything, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a dating relationship, whether you have children together or planning on having children together. It's an earned process. And if, as you develop a relationship, you're not talking about these things in the good communication, if things like honesty, loyalty, respect, communication are not talked about in a regular way, on a regular basis, then you may confront or may find yourself dealing with the opposite, a lot of negative things like disrespect, lack of communication, or, like was mentioned, someone walking away, right? So the approach should be, when you first meet somebody, you should talk about your values, your beliefs, what's important to you. Because early on, if you find out that you and that person aren't compatible because you don't share the same values, what if being honest is not important to them? What if communication is not something that they want to do? What if they don't want to be in a relationship where you are equal? Then that's something that in the beginning you want to know, so that you can either, move on, and leave that relationship, or decide if you're going to try to work on those things. If you find yourself already in a relationship and these things are not happening, the communication is not happening, the respect is not happening, and all these things, then these are things that then fall on us to make a decision, the best decision for us, right? Is this something that's worth, continuing to communicate about, or is it abusive? And remember, we talked about the power and control, and I need to work on a safety plan and have someone support me and be able to get out of this relationship, right? So those are two different things, like before we even get serious, and then while we're already together. And I think these conversations are important, especially before you get into a relationship or as you're in a relationship, because then you really focus on what's important to you, right? And what do you deserve? You all deserve a relationship that is free from abuse and violence, that is full of respect, care, love, support, and equality. And that is, it should be a, that is not even that it should be, it is your basic human rights, right? And sometimes as we heard these messages as we were children, we may have felt that we don't deserve it. We may have felt that we're broken or we're bad, or these things aren't for me. But I'm here to tell you that they are for you, no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, no matter what you do, no matter your background, your education, no matter where you live. These are basic human rights for healthy relationships, right? And sometimes it's hard because we think, we kind of throw up our hands and say, well, this is not real. But it is real, and we can work on these things being real, right? Sometimes we get confused when we think, love is something that I hear a lot about is some people confuse even jealousy with love. Jealousy is not love. Jealousy is a feeling, right? It's an emotion, it's a feeling. And in and of itself, it's something that we can process and unpack why we feel that way. But when that jealousy creates an action or behavior by someone where then they are telling you what to do, what not to do, who to talk to, who to be with, and then they are trying to be overprotective, that is not love. That is not healthy, and that's not what we deserve, right? We are not someone's property in that they can tell us, all of these things and it be okay, right? Jealousy is not about love, right? So if we hear that if he is not jealous, that he doesn't love you, that is really a myth. That is a big myth. And I talk to teenagers about it. I talk to young adults about it. I talk to older folks about it, elders, because I think that as women, we hear this and we kind of think, oh, well, then that means that I'm so important to this person, that I'm so valuable, that they are acting on their jealousy, right? And that's not about value. That's not about how much they love you. That's not about any of that. That's really about men trying to exercise their own power and control, their dominance, their wanting to have ownership over you. And sometimes these words seem very, school-like or very academic, but basically it's about really controlling and saying that I can control my wife or my girlfriend or the mother of my children in this way, and it's okay, right? It's not okay, right? So love and jealousy are not are not compatible. They're not on the same wavelength. Sometimes we hear folks say, well, I'm doing this because I love you, or this is going to hurt me because it's going to hurt me more than it hurts you. And none of that is based on reality. If their jealousy is justifying them hitting you, if their jealousy is justifying them not allowing you to go to work or go to school or have friends, if their jealousy is making sure that they go through your phone, go through your cell phone, then that's not a healthy thing, right? If someone is making you give them your passwords to your social media or passwords to your accounts or things like that, that is not based on respect and mutuality and trust. That is the total opposite. That is based on power and control and all of those other things, right? And I find that those are common examples of what we see in everyday life, that sometimes society in our communities give it a pass and make it seem like it's okay, but it is not okay. As women, we have a right to not only live free from violence, but you have a right to your own privacy. You have a right to your own ownership and agency of things. And it can get confusing when we hear people on board with that, or when we hear that, oh, that's just okay, that's just your husband or your partner. It's not okay, right? It's not okay. So, equality wheel. A lot of times we talk about the power and control wheel, which is the abuse wheel, but I wanted us to focus on what a relationship is like, a loving relationship based on equality, right? We're looking at, what we talked about earlier, positive and healthy way of, communicating. It should be non-threatening, right? Talking and acting so that you feel safe and comfortable, right? And you're comfortable doing these things. That is based on love. It is not based and respect, right? And equality and nonviolence. See how nonviolence is all around the wheel, right? Respect, listening to her, non-judgmentally, being emotionally affirming and understanding and valuing her opinions. And we're using her, this is a wheel that's used generally for women survivors, but that could be interchanged with they and them, or he and him. The bottom line is that we are respecting who we are with. We're listening to them. We're being non-judgmental, right? Trust and support. A loving, healthy relationship is based in trust and support, supporting their goals, respecting their right to their own feelings, their own friends, own activities, their own opinions, right? We want to make sure that that is a part of this relationship, because if not, then the opposite is true, right? The opposite about not trusting, not showing support. We're looking at honesty and accountability, right? Accepting responsibility for yourself, acknowledging past use of violence if you've had, and admitting being wrong, communicating openly and truthfully. If there is a time where, in a relationship they did something that hurt you, if they cannot take responsibility and accountability and admit that they're wrong, that might be a red flag here, that this is not necessarily the healthiest relationship. If you have children together, there's going to be some responsible parenting, sharing the responsibilities of being parents, being positive and nonviolent role models to children. Shared responsibility, right? You are mutually agreeing on a fair distribution of work. Basically, like things that we have in our home or in our family or in a relationship, we're going to make these decisions together. It's not one person making decisions. So, I think sometimes we get caught up in things being so 50-50 that we're not looking at mutuality, right? Sometimes one person is better at cooking, or sometimes one person is better at doing laundry, or one person is helping the kids with the homework, or whatever the case may be. It doesn't have to be a straight down the line 50-50, but let's say it's, 30-70. My 30 should be as important or as equal in value as the other person's 70. So it is about just shared responsibility, and however you decide to break it up, but both have equal value, and we are both making decisions together. When we're looking at economic partnership, we're looking at making decisions about money together, right? Both parties benefit from whatever money decisions you're making. And then last but not least, negotiation and fairness, seeking mutually satisfying resolutions to conflict. Basically, in common English, is we are going to figure this out in the best way possible, with respect, with love, mutually, and we're going to accept change and be willing to compromise, right? All of these things that are in this wheel, these are little segments of things that we want to have in a healthy relationship, right? We want to look at these things in a way that we have a right to, in a way that we deserve, in a way that may be counter to some of the messages that we heard growing up. And it may be opposite to the messages that we hear from um, the person we're with, right? But the purpose of the talk today was to really reflect on this, this compare and contrast, and really understand that this is doable, this is possible, and you have a right to it. Many times I hear people say, well, that's not real. No one's like that. People can't do that. But it is real and we can work toward it, right? Of course, no one is perfect. We all make mistakes. People make mistakes. But if, within relationships, if there is no compromise, if there is no mutuality, if there's no respect, then you're living with the opposite, which is fear, which is control, which is, submission because of fear. It is all of the negative things that we want to avoid, we want to not have in our lives, and we also don't deserve to have in our lives, right? And this is from the National Center of Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault, but it is used throughout the country really to have these talks, to really think about that love is not abuse and abuse is not love. But even if we don't want to label it abuse, any of these unhealthy behaviors are not, are not okay, and that we deserve to really aspire for what this equality wheel has, right? And mutuality, respect, equality, all of these things, we work toward them, right? We work in partnership, in relationship. Relationship is partnership. It is not about dominance. It is not about one person having all the control and all the say. It is really something that we need to sometimes take a moment and step back and reflect. Is this is what I have? This is not what I have. Is this what I want? Is this what I don't want? But certainly very important for us. There are a lot of different campaigns and stuff that we see in the domestic violence movement, and there's a lot of talk about these things with teenagers when young people are starting new relationships. But I always say it's never too late to have these conversations. You don't have to be a teenager to want to aspire for a healthy relationship. I think in all of our lives, from the time we can be in relationship, in an intimate relationship, to the end of our days here, we all deserve and we all have a right to have a loving, caring, respectful, non-violent, non-abusive relationship. And sometimes the things get a little confusing because of some of the messages that we talked about earlier, but stay in your truth, right? And stay in your beliefs. And if you know that these are the things that you deserve, then it's sometimes a little bit easier to navigate and negotiate whether you're going to stay in relationships, whether you're going to, work on them. But we all have this right to be in a violent-free relationship. And there's violence all over the world, right? And we see violence on TV, we see violence, we hear it, we're looking at war. At the very least, in your own space, whether that's home or in relationship, you want to feel safe, right? Safety should be a priority. And that means emotional safety, it means physical safety, it means having food, having clothing, having shelter, but also deep down, it's the person who's supposed to be loving you the most or is there for you should be there for you and not hurting and harming you. You know, easy for us to talk about here online, and I know in real life sometimes it becomes too complicated. But that is the bottom line. Safety, right? Safety. Because of patriarchy, because of male dominance, sometimes our experiences are minimized even more so, and it's no one escapes this. No one goes unscathed, right? Sexism is real. We look at funding in our government. We look at what's happening in war. Women and children bear a big brunt of what's happening in the war right now. Women and children bear a big brunt of what's happening in our city. So, these conversations are very, very important. And as women, we can process that, unpack that as best as we can, but knowing if it hurts us, if it diminishes our spirit, if it is ultimately disrespectful to us and takes our own power away, then there is something wrong with that picture. There's definitely something wrong with that picture. Any experience that takes your power away from you or deflates you and makes you minimize, that you know that it is not healthy and it is not safe, right? And whether I am, looking at it as a young person in my teens or my 20s, all the way through, my 90s and hundreds, if it feels unsafe, it is unsafe.